Now, more than 15,000 small boats migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year. GB News can exclusively reveal today. The figure was reached after a further 315 migrants made the illegal journey today. And it follows another tragedy in the Channel just hours earlier when one migrant drowned and another 71 were rescued after their boat began deflating off the French coast near Calais. And I can now show you this is footage of boats rolling into Dover earlier on today. And this is a Border Force Ranger vessel leaving Ramsgate, and you can see there circling. This is that disaster last night where one tragically died, 71 went overboard after a craft deflated. This is a British vessel performing a rescue mission, and you'll now see shortly that vessel, Border Force Ranger, moves towards Calais, as you can see now, going back to Calais. A British vessel in French waters performing a rescue mission. Begs the question, why are British vessels so deep in French waters getting involved? Of course, this was a disaster. People's lives were at risk. But where were the French in that issue? Now, it's also been reported that up to 90,000 migrants who were set for deportation to Rwanda are now instead to be fast-tracked to claim asylum under the new Labour government. Immigration caseworkers could soon begin processing claims of people threatened for removal to the East African country when the Home Secretary introduces this new legislation. Quite a change of position, isn't it? And to discuss that, I'm now joined by the former Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Johnathan Gullis. Johnathan, welcome to the show. It's been a long time. Hope you're keeping well. So we've gone from Rwanda to rolling out the red carpet. It seems the Refugee Council today has announced that of these 90,000 who are now able to apply for asylum, 60,000 will probably get the right to remain. Johnathan Gullis, what message does that send out to the people smugglers?
Well, Martin, it's what we were warning for so long, and particularly during the election campaign, that Labour's migrant amnesty is in full swing. And it's just very sad to see that people who wanted to see tough action on the borders, wanted us to take back control, wanted us to have that deterrent in Rwanda has sadly been robbed. And Labour have lazily assumed that whilst they did indeed, of course, win the election, it was a very shallow victory when you look at how many votes across Conservatives, Reform UK, who, collectively were the most vocal voices for making sure that we had that effective deterrent, who wanted to see us stop the boats. And I think it sends the entirely wrong message. It will essentially aid and abet the smuggling gangs in their operational model, be able to convince more and more people, thousands more people, to hand over their thousands of pounds to get in unseaworthy vessels and attempt to come over to this country illegally if they think they have the very high chance of being processed and therefore the very high chance of being approved to remain. Unless Labour's going to suddenly announce they're going to do returns deals with Iran, with Syria, with Afghanistan, which, let's be honest, we don't think is going to happen, and nor would it be appropriate for us to send taxpayers' money to such countries where they would abuse the human rights of the individuals that we send back there.
Doesn't that point to a quandary? Johnathan, it's fair to say that Rishi Sunak couldn't stop the boats any more than King Canute could stop the tide. Doesn't seem that anybody can do this. And in fact, that's why the Reform Party probably gained so many votes on the Conservatives, that the immigration, the small boats, the illegal immigration, as well as illegal immigration into the country was a huge dividing point. But what do we do? What do we do? It seems that we've gone from the effective offshore processing deterrent. Rwanda had its problems. Only 2 people went voluntary. Nobody was ever forcefully deported. Will we face the same old issue of the European Court of Human Rights lawyers simply blocking any form of deportations? Johnathan, you can see on your screen now exclusive pictures obtained by GB News. This is Border Force Defender rolling ashore this morning, 315 in one day. Can we ever stop this, or are we just stuck with it?
Well, look, Martin, I think you've raised some very fair questions there. Essentially, the Rwanda deterrent, I believe, would have been very effective, but sadly, obviously, we were unable to get it going before the general election and weren't able to win the election in order to display what I believe would have happened, which is people getting on planes, taken to Rwanda, a safe third country to start their lives, and ultimately would have smashed apart the operational model of the smuggling gangs. But, that decision by Labour has meant that we have now no effective deterrent. They're now scrapping the right for people, scrapping the law change, which said that if you come here illegally, you can't claim asylum. So now they're saying you can. that again aids and abets the smuggling gangs. And then on top of that, we can also see the fact that it's all well and good rebranding Small Boats Command. It's all well and good saying you'll do another deal with France, which will see, I'm sure, more taxpayers' money. It's all well and good saying that you want to use some foreign aid funding down the line in places like the Horn of Africa, where we know some of these migrants have come from. But until you tackle the fact that these people are predominantly coming from countries like Syria, like Iran, like Afghanistan, as they're claiming, the fact that over 80% of them are young, single men, until we realise the reality here, which is that we need to put them on planes, immediately deport them, and whilst they're waiting in this country, they must be detained, not in hotels, not in social housing, but detained, so they understand that they don't have the liberties and freedoms that you and I enjoy because we're law-abiding citizens. Then essentially we're just opening ourselves up further down the track. And I think that it's just a very sad day to see that Labour, I think, has this as their biggest weakness. And despite all the talk, I think the reality is we'll just see more and more boats coming over and very little actually done apart from tough rhetoric regarding more deals with France, more schemes with Europe. I mean, I think it was reported to Martin today in the Times that Sir Keir Starmer is open to the negotiations with the EU of us being able to send to the EU, let's say, an illegal migrant, but then obviously being able to accept one back off them in return. What does that do? Absolutely nothing, because it's one in, one out. And that's not what we should be doing. It should be zero in and everyone out who's come here illegally.
Johnathan, today at Blenheim Palace, Sir Keir Starmer was with 50 European leaders. Of course, that was a meeting set up by Rishi Sunak. It's an annual event that was going to happen anyway. But in terms of looking to our European partners, as they're called, for solutions to this, how's that going to work? We revealed on the channel yesterday there have been 1.265 million illegal immigrants into 27 EU member states last year alone. Millions and millions across the countries when you add them up over the past 10 years. Johnathan Gullis, if the European Union can't control their own porous borders, how the heck are they going to stop that inexorable flow of human traffic towards the French coast? And why would they want to stop it?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head here. And I think if the European Union doesn't learn from the absolute drubbing that the centrist and left-wing parties received in those recent elections that saw the rise of centre-right and right-wing parties across Europe who all want to see much tougher and firmer action on migration, both legal and illegal, then obviously you'll see more unrest in Europe, which is not what we want to see, as well as a lack of social cohesion that we sadly see in certain parts of our United Kingdom. That's not what I or you or anyone else who's watching wants to see either. And I think it's therefore absolutely important that we look at countries, for example, like Hungary, who have very firm stances. Viktor Orban, I think, has done a remarkable job. Poland, under the former leadership of the Law and Justice Party, also had a very firm stance when it came to tackling illegal migration as well. And essentially, it's by working together collaboratively to offshore people, put people on planes, deport them to safe third countries. If we can do that collectively as an area, then I think we will, obviously, as I say, deter people from thinking that this is a journey worth risking. And it's, I think, important, and you always get it right, Martin, there's a huge difference. There are people who are human trafficked, and that's an absolute tragedy. But that is a small percentage of those coming here illegally via the small boats. Most of them are smuggled here. Those are people, therefore, migrants choosing to risk their lives, choosing to give thousands of pounds to smuggling gangs, choosing to get into small boats, choosing to enter our country illegally or mainland Europe. And that is an abomination. We cannot stand for it. Borders control, sovereignty is something that is invaluable to every nation across this great world of ours. And we see, therefore, why Joe Biden on the United States side is also going to be in huge trouble when it comes to the fact that we see people flooding across the southern border, and why President Trump and his vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, I think a very fine combination of individuals, will hopefully take the presidency in November this year.
And Johnathan, may I quickly ask you a personal question? You unfortunately lost your seat, as did many Conservatives at the general election. Do you have any plans to get back into politics?
So I'm coming to you live from a very empty office as I'm packing up. Today's my last day in the constituency office before I hand the keys back to the landlord. I would love, of course, to return to the green benches one day in the future, but that is a long way off. I'd have to find whether or not my local association here or anywhere else were willing to have me. But I'm not done in Westminster yet, but I hope to be a strong voice for the Conservative Party from the outside in the coming weeks and months ahead, particularly around the leadership, where I'd be personally backing Priti Patel to become the leader of the Conservative Party, someone who was served William Hague in his private office when we were in opposition after a big electoral defeat, someone who served under Cameron, May and Johnson, so is able to appeal to the broad breadth of the Conservative Party, someone who didn't serve under Rishi or Truss and therefore isn't tainted by those two administrations, but someone Reform will themselves fear, someone who was a Spartan when it came to Brexit, someone who voted against Windsor Framework, someone who is therefore very strong, very principled, and has a massive charm and personality that will galvanise and energise our base and our members. And I think, therefore, we can take the fight back.
Johnathan, I'm smiling because I can still see you got that fire in your banner. Johnathan Gullis, thank you very much for joining us on GB News. And it's always sad to see an office being packed up, but I'm sure there'll be another chapter. All the best. Take care.
Thank you, my friend.
Now, on the way, we'll discuss